Hey folks, my name is Mo Amir and this is VANCOLOUR, British Columbia's bona fide culture and politics TV talk show. Tonight, we have an incredible featured guest who is here to discuss the importance of land acknowledgements and how Indigenous-led real estate developments are transforming Metro Vancouver in a way that's unique to the entire country. A role model for two-spirited Indigenous youth, he also gives his increasingly powerful voice to a variety of social justice issues, including reconciliation, but also climate change activism and urban development. He also helped set up Simon Fraser University's Squamish Language Proficiency Certificate Program, a prominent Indigenous leader who has repeatedly been listed in Vancouver Magazine's Power 50 list over the years. He is the council chairperson of the Squamish Nation. He is, of course, Khelsilem. Khelsilem, so nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
So I want to talk about land acknowledgements, because when I was growing up, I never really heard them. I never heard them in school or otherwise. And certainly now they're almost customary. Like whether it's government or even private organizations, you hear land acknowledgements, and I think we're all quite familiar with them. But I feel like the step that we're missing is explaining their importance and why we do them. So can you help shed a little light on what exactly a land acknowledgement is and what it's supposed to symbolize? Yeah,
definitely. And I think it's a very legitimate question because it is becoming a somewhat ubiquitous thing, but you know, it may not be explained all the time on the role that they play or the history of where they come from. You know, here in Vancouver, we have the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh communities. We share a common culture and ancestry and lineage to this area. And when we look at our history, there's a lot of cultural protocols and customs around how people would interact when they were guests coming into the territory, when they were visiting from other First Nations, for example.
Okay.
And often that would include sort of sometimes asking for permission to come ashore if they're traveling by canoe, maybe exchanging gifts as a part of a symbolism of the intentions that they came with, as opposed to sort of nefarious intentions.
Right.
And so there's some, you know, traditions around it in the sense of we're an oral history. We have an oral culture.
Yeah.
We didn't have a written word, so a lot of our traditions and customs are more oral based. So acknowledging the territory or having somebody from the local territory come and do a welcoming sort of comes from that particular tradition of respecting the people who are from here and that you're sort of entering into their territory, or maybe it's their house or their village. But there's also a political history to it, which is that there was a time period, you know, in the 1960s and 70s after 1950s when there was an explosion of like sort of First Nations political activism.
Okay.
And you have more and more of our elders and leaders sort of standing on stages, getting platforms, getting the microphone and saying, this is the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territory, which at the time would have been very edgy, very radical, very, you know, challenging to the way people were thinking about Canada.
Right.
And then history did its thing, and you had, you know, the recognition of Aboriginal rights and title in the Constitution in '82. You have a number of successive court wins at the Supreme Court of Canada recognizing and affirming rights and title, to the work of reconciliation after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission around the need to acknowledge the history of what's happened in Canada and to try to create a positive future for Canada as well. And I think that's where it gets to, you know, it's intended to be a bit of an act or a symbolic gesture as a starting point to respecting the history and the people here, but it's also intended to be a starting point that moves to other things as well.
Right. So I'm hearing it's almost like a hybrid of sort of modern ideas of reconciliation, but then also a historical tradition from the ancestral peoples that have inhabited the lands. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about it is that there is some times where people are feeling, oh, it's very, you know, rote, or it's very like perfunctory.
Right.
It's performative. Is it really genuine? Should we even do it if it's not genuine? And I'll admit that there's times where I've heard it and I thought it was pretty awkward and kind of weird to, you know, like I'd be in a staff room and everybody's like, okay, we're gonna call in all the staff for like, you know, it's Shelley's like birthday and we're gonna have like a cake.
Yeah.
And like before we like sing happy birthday to Shelley, we're gonna like acknowledge that this is the territory of the Musqueam Squamish. Like it's just like there's weird times to do it. I completely admit that. But I think the way I often explain it to people is that if you understand it as a diplomatic gesture, that you're engaging with either a government or another civil society almost, or another like a country, there's diplomatic gestures that we would do if we were visiting another country, or if we're meeting with dignitaries of another country,
Right.
or if we're visiting that country, we want to show our respect to that country, whether it's speaking their language or acknowledging their history or
Right.
something, along those lines. And so when you kind of think of it through that lens, in the same way that there are diplomatic gestures that would be awkward to do at the wrong time.
Sure, yeah.
There's wrong times to do land acknowledgements. But what I think has been really exciting is how they have moved into so many different places. At the beginning of the Canucks game for the last 2 years, a number of other sports teams have done it. Politicians have done it for years now, or a decade now. It's happening within the schools, but also within other institutions, both public and private. And I think it's that there's a lot of leadership that is trying to find ways to build good relationships with the Indigenous peoples, and also to build positive impact within Indigenous communities,
Right.
given the sort of socioeconomic conditions that we're dealing with in Canada. So I think people are genuinely trying to do the right thing, trying to find a way to do the right thing, but there's still a lot of learning to be done, and there's more work to done. I always say that it's a starting point to something else.
Sure. Yeah. Now, there have been some controversies with city councils in Metro Vancouver. Last year, under Mayor Doug McCallum, Surrey City Council, which has the largest urban Indigenous population in BC, voted to not do these land acknowledgements. And recently, the new city council in West Vancouver decided that they're not going to do at least the verbal land acknowledgement in their council meetings. Do you have any sense of why? Because part of me can appreciate the importance of them, but then can also say, it's 10 seconds to start a meeting. What is the big deal? Why do you think we're starting to see some of these local governments, show resistance to doing these land acknowledgements?
There's a number of reasons why, and I think some of it comes to everybody's at their own place in their journey, I think, around reconciliation, or around, I think reconciliation can be a bit of an abstract concept sometimes, and it has its own problems, but if it's just building good relationships with Indigenous communities, everybody's on their own journey of level of readiness or interest or commitment or passion for it. And so I think that there are the lack of land acknowledgement sort of is a bit of a signal sometimes to, I think, some Indigenous leaders or communities on, have they even done that? Like, if that's the beginning step, if that's step one, have they even done that to be able to start moving on to other steps?
Well, it just doesn't seem conducive to opening up a good relationship when the city councils say we're not going to do it.
yeah, and to make changes like that without consulting or talking to the communities as
Right.
well. And I think there's a lot of really good work happening at the municipal level, and it wasn't always this way. I mean, municipalities for a very long time, until very recently, often took a very strong hardline stance that First Nations issues are federal and provincial only. We deal with only municipal stuff. That's not our business. We're not getting involved in that. And there was a very hardline stance around it. We're not mandated to deal with First Nations issues.
Right.
And that was a hardline stance. And there was a lot of big debates, 10, 15 years ago at Metro Board. More and more mayors and councils were much more open about this position than are now. But things have changed. And I think things have changed as well because, one, Indigenous people are also residents of all these municipalities.
Yeah, exactly.
And two, that there's a lot of good things that can happen from non-Indigenous communities and Indigenous communities working together, and that we can create a lot of positive change for everybody. And I think people have come around to realizing that. And so there's more work happening now at a municipal level, whereas provinces and the federal government have been working on First Nations issues for a long time. And we're seeing really municipalities are the last frontier governmentally of that work. And,
Sure.
and I think there's a lot of good stuff happening there now, but there's still a few holdouts who
Absolutely. Well, hey, Khelsilem, we're going to talk about some real estate right after the commercial break.
Sounds good.
Folks, stick around because after some business, Indigenous-led development in Metro Vancouver is catching the attention of the world. Did you know that over the past 8 years, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations have collaboratively or separately acquired 175 acres of land in Metro Vancouver, with another 100 acres in negotiation? How will this transform a city where housing affordability has been getting worse and worse? And why is Metro Vancouver seemingly a unique case in Canada when it comes to Indigenous-led development of this scale? Khelsilem will still be here to talk about it up next. I'm Mo Amir. This is VANCOLOUR.